Welcome in, learner. We're thrilled you're joining us today because we are opening up a stack of sources that it's going to completely upend how you think about physical reality
Oh, absolutely.
and memory and time. Today's deep dive is centered on this incredibly dense, cutting-edge set of technical notes. It outlines a framework called Ratiospace.
Yeah, Ratiospace.
Right. And these notes were authored by a researcher outlining the algebraic geometry of space and time, and specifically how physical systems remember their own history. And I have to say, reading through this, they're not your standard physics papers.
No, not at all. The discipline in these sources is it's really striking. Because we're looking at raw, uninterpreted structural mathematics, the author goes out of his way to avoid prematurely naming things.
No.
Like naming these structures with physics buzzwords, you won't find any assumptions about like a ticking cosmic clock or the standard model of particle physics.
He doesn't just assume an electron is doing this or that.
Exactly. It is purely about the skeleton of how a system evolves, and he's using integers and grids and these exact geometric structures.
All right, let's unpack the skeleton.
Mm.
Because our specific mission for this deep dive is to isolate and really understand one truly mind-bending concept from these notes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the Parabolic Z fiber return displacement.
That's a mouthful.
It's a huge mouthful. But we want to understand how a physical system can basically appear to return to its exact starting point, wiping the slate clean, while secretly accumulating this invisible, mathematically perfect memory of its entire journey.
Right.
Because usually when we think of like a pendulum swinging back to the center, we just assume the slate is wiped clean, like it's back where it began.
Well, sure. I mean, we tend to equate a system state entirely with what we can measure right in the present moment. So if it looks identical to how it looked yesterday, our classical intuition tells us, oh, it is in the exact same state.
It obviously.
But the mathematics of ratio space kind of shatters that assumption, because it draws a really hard line between the full reality of a system and the limited slice of it that we are actually allowed to observe.
And that's fascinating. So to understand how a system can return to a starting point and still be fundamentally altered, we have to start with that full reality. The notes call the true complete state of a system an oriented unimodular frame.
Right.
Now, I want to avoid reading textbook formulas here, but conceptually, we are basically talking about a 2x2 grid of whole numbers.
Of integers. Yeah, that grid is the structural scaffolding of the entire system. So in mathematical terms, it's an SL2Z, meaning its multiplied diagonals balance out perfectly to 1.
Okay.
And that preserves its exact geometry as it moves. So you can imagine this 2x2 grid as containing two distinct columns of information.
Right. So left side, right side.
Exactly. And this isn't just a snapshot of where the system is right now. That grid is a perfectly lossless ledger. It contains the exact unbroken ancestral path of every single step the system took to arrive at this current moment.
But the catch is that we as observers, we almost never get to see that full history-bearing ledger. We interact with the universe through what the framework calls a receiver.
A receiver.
Right. And the most basic receiver described here gives us what they call the exact contrast.
Right.
It takes that rich 2x2 grid and essentially just squashes it down.
Yeah.
Instead of giving you both columns of information, the receiver just subtracts one column from the other.
Yeah.
And it outputs this single flattened directional arrow.
The information loss there is just staggering. You have this massive structural frame holding a perfect record of history, and the reception process just collapses it into just the difference between its two parts.
Right.
So it's a very primitive, visible contrast.
I always like to use analogies for this stuff. So think about a traditional mechanical analog clock. You walk into a room, you look at the clock face, and you see both hands pointing straight up at 12 o'clock.
Right.
That is the exact contrast. That is the only thing the receiver, meaning your eyes, can detect.
Just the hands.
Just the hands.
Yeah.
But hidden behind that clock face are the gears.
Yeah.
And the gears represent the full unimodular frame. Those gears know exactly how many thousands of rotations have occurred.
Oh.
They know how many days or months or years it took to get those hands to that exact position. So the gears hold the ancestral history. But the visible contrast just says, hey, it's new.
That visualization captures the core mechanic perfectly because multiple radically different histories in the gears can produce the exact same visible output on the clock face.
Right.
So mathematicians group all those unseen histories together into a structure called a fiber.
A fiber, okay.
Yeah, a fiber is essentially a hidden dimension of information that just sits vertically behind a single visible state.
And in this framework, that hidden dimension takes a very specific shape, the parabolic Z fiber.
Right. Because the math proves that all the full frames sharing that identical visible contrast, well, they form a native discrete subgroup. And most importantly, this subgroup maps perfectly to the integers.
To Z.
Right, to Z. It is a hidden integer number line.
So it's a hidden ladder of whole numbers, basically.
Basically.
But the author adds a massive caveat here. This isn't just a standard number line where 0 is the center of the universe.
Yeah.
The notes describe this fiber as a torsor.
Yeah, it's a torsor.
Which means there is no absolute origin point.
No. You cannot point to an absolute 0 in this hidden dimension. There's no Euclidean ruler you can lay down. There's no universal center. And no probability averaging required. You can only measure exact relative displacement.
Okay.
So you can know with absolute certainty that you have moved 5 steps up the ladder or say 3 steps down relative to where you started.
Right.
But you can never claim to know where you are on the ladder objectively.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we have the pieces on the board. We have visible state, the exact contrast. And we have this hidden vertical ladder of integers, the fiber. Here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when a physical system actually goes on a journey, it interacts with the environment, and then eventually returns to its starting point?
Well, the system evolves.
Yeah.
The hidden gears, the full frame, they turn and shift as the system takes a winding path through whatever environment it's in.
Yeah.
And eventually, the system's visible contrast returns to the exact state it started in.
Right.
So to any external observer or any standard physical sensor reading that contrast, the system has perfectly reset.
The hands on the clock are back at 12 o'clock. The pendulum is back at dead center. It looks like a completely clean slate.
But the underlying full frame did not reset. Because the system went on a physical journey, the frame has shifted by a unique integer along that hidden ladder.
Ah.
The notes label this hidden shift K. Yeah, that single integer K is the contrast fiber return displacement. So while the outward appearance tells you nothing has changed, the internal ledger has tabulated a permanent irreversible shift.
And the sources emphasize that this displacement is perfectly additive, which is a detail I found just absolutely wild. If the system takes one specific journey, returns to its visible starting point, and secretly accumulates a shift of K,
Right.
and then later takes a totally different journey, returns again, and accumulates a hidden shift of L.
Yeah.
If you run both of those journeys sequentially, the hidden displacement is exactly K plus L.
Exactly.
It's an infallible, inescapable memory bank.
The system simply accumulates history as an exact whole number. It never drops a single fraction of that history, even when the visible facade projects total stillness and total reset.
So I have to play the skeptic for a moment here.
Sure.
If this fiber is entirely hidden from the receiver, if the contrast is literally the only thing we ever observe, and that contrast is perfectly identical, how do we know this isn't just a brilliant mathematical parlor trick? It's like it's a beautiful concept on paper, but does this invisible integer ever actually assert itself in reality?
Oh, the author anticipates that exact pushback.
Yeah.
There is a dedicated section, I think it's note 2 in the sources.
Yeah, note 2.
And that addresses the physical reality of this hidden dimension through a concept called distinguishability depth.
Meaning how deep into the sequence you have to go to tell two identical looking things apart.
Exactly. Let's apply it. Say you have two systems sitting side by side. Their visible contrasts are absolutely identical.
12 o'clock and 12 o'clock.
Right. To any classical sensor, they are in the same state. But internally, their hidden integer displacements are drastically different. One took a massive journey before returning, and the other just sat there.
Okay.
The mathematical proof shows that to tell them apart, all it takes is a single lawful continuation. Just one step into the future.
Oh, wow. Let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. It's like having two identical wind-up toys on a table. They look exactly the same. But one has its internal spring wound incredibly tight.
Yeah.
That's our high hidden integer displacement.
Right.
And the other is completely unwound. Now, just sitting there, you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
But the moment you let them take one single step forward, the one with the hidden history violently springs across the table while the other does absolutely nothing.
The hidden history violently dictates the immediate future. The information of the journey wasn't erased or overwritten. It was flawlessly encoded in a structure that requires succession.
Succession.
Movement into the next state to unmask it. The moment the system tries to evolve again, the hidden displacement forces the visible states to just drastically splinter apart.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
An invisible dimension that perfectly records history is mathematically additive and dictates the trajectory of the future when you try to move it.
Yep.
Now, for anyone who follows physics, that sounds suspiciously like a gauge field.
Oh, absolutely.
Or like quantum spin.
Yeah.
Or a holonomy variable. You know, you transport a vector around a closed loop in a curved space and it comes back pointing it slightly different way.
Right.
It feels like the author is deliberately leading us toward a unified theory of quantum physics here.
The architecture is undeniably similar to a holonomy variable. But this raises an important question, and this is where the author's aggressive conservatism really comes into play.
Yeah.
The text builds a very strict intellectual boundary between modular mathematics and physical interpretation.
Because the notes break all the mathematical behaviors down into 3 strict modular sectors.
Right, and the classification is based on the trace of the grid, basically the sum of its main diagonal. So first you have the elliptic sector.
Okay.
This is the realm of finite loops and closed cyclic classes, things returning in upon themselves.
Right.
Second, you have the hyperbolic sector. This occurs when the trace is greater than 2. And it dictates multiplicative expansion, exponential scaling, things blowing apart.
So if the first sector is a closed loop, and the second sector is an exponential explosion, well, the third sector has to be the exact boundary condition sitting right between them.
Yes.
Like the Goldilocks zone, where things neither loop nor explode.
Exactly. That boundary is the parabolic sector, where the trace is exactly 2. And this is the exclusive home of our Z fiber. It exists purely for translation and return displacement. It doesn't scale up or expand. It just patiently accumulates linear memory step by discrete step.
And returning to your point about the author's restraint, because this parabolic accumulation perfectly mirrors how quantum phase shifts work, it would be so easy for him to publish a paper claiming, oh, I've solved quantum gravity.
Oh, yeah?
Or I discovered the secret of the standard model. But the author flatly refuses to do that.
He really does. He explicitly states that calling this fiber return a physical gauge field or physical time is an overclaim, unless you also prove a transport law and actual physical dynamics.
Which he doesn't do here.
Right. The mathematical framework provides the structural grammar. It proves that a universe could compute history and memory this way without needing a ticking absolute clock.
Yeah.
But to claim that an electron or a photon is actually utilizing this exact Z fiber, well, you would need a separate, rigorously tested correspondence theorem, one connecting the math to actual physical mass and energy.
It's the difference between an architectural blueprint and a finished house.
That's a good way to put it.
The Ratiospace math gives us the perfect blueprint.
Yeah.
We know exactly where the load-bearing walls are. We know the angles. We know the structural geometry. But you cannot look at a blueprint and claim to know whether the physical house will be built out of brick or wood or steel.
Right.
The math is the blueprint. The physical world is the material.
And until you run physical material through the blueprint, it remains just an abstract structure.
But a blueprint is useless if we can't test whether it actually bears weight right. And the sources don't just stock at pure mathematical theory. There is a deeply practical experiment in these notes called a tension delta engine.
Yes, the tension delta engine.
And this is where the abstract algebraic geometry crashes directly into gorgeous computational reality.
Well, the tension delta engine simulation is the bridge. It demonstrates how continuous analog physical movement in the real world can be perfectly integrated into this discrete integer-based mathematical grid.
Okay, let's walk through how this engine actually works, because the mechanics are just fascinating. The simulation took 8 seconds of continuous physical oscillation.
Right.
So picture holding your smartphone in your hand and just rhythmically tipping it back and forth for 8 seconds.
Yeah.
The internal accelerometer is generating a constant continuous wave of analog data. And they fed that raw continuous physical tipping straight into the Ratiospace framework.
Now, we usually think of a computer processing that kind of data by slicing it up with a high-frequency CPU clock.
Right.
Taking thousands of little floating point snapshots a second.
Yeah. Chop, chop, chop.
Exactly. But the tension delta engine completely bypasses that. The continuous physical environment acts as its own analog integrator.
Oh.
So as the physical sensor tips and inchworms its way through time, it crosses specific physical thresholds. And every time the continuous physical tension crosses a natural boundary, the system compiles that movement into a single discrete step in the underlying grid.
Like a literal step left or step right.
Yes.
So the continuous wave is translated into a 61-step discrete walk through our 2x2 integer grid.
Right.
The physical environment is doing the heavy lifting of integration for free.
Exactly.
It's naturally building up the tension delta without needing a processor to artificially chop up time.
And the numbers generated by this process are just staggering. After just 8 seconds of an accelerometer rocking back and forth, the discrete walk spins up a coordinate address depth in the tens of billions.
The sources show a matrix output containing the number. I actually have it right here. It's 52,554,171,719.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. 8 seconds of gentle physical wobbling translated through this geometric blueprint generates an integer in the tens of billions.
Right.
And that isn't a random massive number. It is an exact, untruncated, flawless historical ledger of that specific physical trajectory.
Every single microscopic variation.
Every single one. And how that sensor tipped over 8 seconds is baked into the architecture of that one integer.
It proves that you can pack immense historical depth into a simple 2x2 structural frame.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, this introduces a massive computational hurdle for traditional hardware.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, because if you want to compare two systems to see which state is more coherent, and both systems are holding integers in the tens of billions standard computer architectures, they really struggle.
Right.
They usually have to calculate transcendental functions like, raising the golden ratio to massive powers. And they do this using floating point approximations.
And floating point math is messy. It uses decimals, it requires rounding, it introduces artificial errors.
Yeah.
And when the numbers get too big, the whole system just crashes under the computational overhead.
Exactly.
So how does the tension delta engine read an integer that is 52 billion without catching fire?
Well, it relies on a mechanism called the two-integer sign test, because every possible state in this entire framework can be expressed exactly within a specific algebraic structure. The system completely abandons floating point decimals.
Wow.
Instead, it triggers a coherent structural snap.
A snap. What do you mean?
Imagine two interlocking puzzle pieces. Rather than calculating endless decimal points to see if they fit the system, it simply extracts two whole numbers from the massive grid. Let's call them A and B.
Okay.
And it runs a pure geometric balancing test. It squares the whole numbers, weighs them against each other, and asks one simple question. Is the left side structurally heavier than the right side?
So just whole numbers multiplied by themselves.
Yeah.
Pure integer arithmetic.
Pure integer arithmetic. In the provided simulation, they took two incredibly massive states that were microscopically close to each other.
Okay.
If you looked at them through traditional floating point math, the difference between them was a decimal, like 0.00036.
Oh, man.
Yeah. A traditional computer would be sweating to maintain that decimal accuracy. But the integer sign test bypassed the decimals completely. It instantly resolved the comparison down to an exact integer difference of just 76.
Wow.
At the absolute bottom of the calculation.
It finds the highest coherent state instantly with 100% absolute precision.
Yes.
Zero floating point operations, zero rounding errors. It just clicks into place.
Just clicks.
It's incredibly elegant. It feels more like the physical universe finding its natural resting state than a computer crunching code.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, bringing this all together, the tension delta simulation suggests a radical paradigm shift in computation and memory. In traditional tech, if you want higher precision, you have to ramp up the clock frequency. You need a faster CPU, which drains power, creates heat, and eventually just hits a wall.
Yeah, it's unsustainable.
But Ratiospace demonstrates that succession can be discrete, yet history can be infinite. The physical world itself is capable of computing its deep ancestral path.
Wow.
The universe may very well be tabulating history structurally as exact integers, utterly bypassing the need for a ticking system clock.
Which perfectly circles us back to the sheer mind-bending reality of the Parabolic Z fiber return displacement. If there is one core takeaway from this stack of notes, it is the mathematical proof that physical systems can flawlessly record their entire history in a hidden dimension.
Right.
That hidden ledger is mathematically additive, it is structurally permanent, and it operates entirely independent of the system's outward appearance.
Oh.
You can return to a visible baseline. The exact contrast can project a completely clean slate, but the hidden fiber knows every single step you took.
information loss at the observable level is an illusion. The unimodular frame retains the full weight of the journey, resting silently waiting for the very next physical step to unmask it.
Well, I want to leave you with a thought learner that expands on this idea outside of the realm of abstract mathematics.
Okay.
Because we spent this entire deep dive talking about accelerometers and continuous integrations and hidden geometric integers.
Right.
But if physical reality natively encodes these hidden return displacements every single time a sensor tips back and forth,
Yeah.
what does that imply for biological systems?
Oh.
For us, like think about human psychology or the subjective weight of our own lived habits. Every one of us has experienced a massive, exhausting intellectual or emotional journey.
Sure.
You fight through months or years of challenges, and at the end of it, you look around your life and you feel like you are right back exactly where you started. You feel totally stuck.
Yeah, I think everyone's felt that.
Right. But based on the architecture of Ratiospace, maybe you're just experiencing your own exact contrast to the outside world and even to your own conscious observation. You look identical to how you looked before the journey. But internally, your biological and psychological matrix has secretly tabulated a massive additive integer displacement in your own internal parabolic fiber.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
You have accumulated a hidden weight of structural experience. And even if you feel like you are at an absolute standstill, that invisible history isn't gone. It is sitting there fully loaded into your framework, ready to drastically and violently alter the trajectory of your very next step into the future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the visible surface, and we'll see you next time.